Konnichiwa. Welcome to another intriguing tale from the annals of history.
Vice Admiral Lord Horatio Nelson was a British flag officer in the Royal Navy. His inspirational leadership, grasp of strategy, and unconventional tactics brought about a number of decisive British naval victories during the French Revolutionary and Napoleonic Wars. Vice Admiral Lord Horatio Nelson, 1758 to 1805, had been through it all. He had lost his right eye in the Siege of Calvi and his right arm in the Battle of Trafalgar. He had defeated the Spanish at Cape St. Vincent in 1797 and had thwarted Napoleon's Egyptian campaign by defeating his navy at the Battle of the Nile the following year. But none of his tribulations and triumphs prepared him for the problems he faced from his own colleagues in the British Navy as they prepared to go to war against Denmark in February 1801. Nelson, England's most glorious war hero, was the obvious choice to lead the fleet. Instead, the Admiralty chose Sir Hyde Parker, with Nelson his second-in-command. This war was a delicate business. It was intended to force the disobedient Danes to comply with the British-led embargo on the shipping of military goods to France. The fiery Nelson was prone to lose his cool. He hated Napoleon, and if he went too far against the Danes, he would produce a diplomatic fiasco. Sir Hyde was an older, more stable, even-tempered man who would do the job and nothing more. Nelson swallowed his pride and took the assignment. But he saw trouble ahead. He knew that time was of the essence. The faster the navy sailed, the less chance the Danes would have to build up their defences. The ships were ready to sail, but Parker's motto was everything in good order. It wasn't his style to hurry. Nelson hated his casualness and burned for action. He reviewed intelligence reports, studied maps, and came up with a detailed plan for fighting the Danes. He wrote to Parker urging him to seize the initiative. Parker ignored him. At last, on March 11th, the British fleet set sail. Instead of heading for Copenhagen, however, Parker anchored well to the north of the city's harbour and called a meeting of his captains. According to intelligence reports, he explained, the Danes had prepared elaborate defences for Copenhagen. Boats anchored in the harbour, forts to the north and south, and mobile artillery batteries could blast the British out of the water. How to fight this artillery without terrible losses? Also, pilots who knew the waters around Copenhagen reported that they were treacherous, places of sandbars and tricky winds. Navigating these dangers under bombardment would be harrowing. With all of these difficulties, perhaps it was best to wait for the Danes to leave harbour and then fight them in open sea. Nelson struggled to control himself. Finally, he let loose, pacing the room, the stub of his lost arm jerking as he spoke. No war, he said, had ever been won by waiting. The Danish defences looked formidable to those who are children at war, but he had worked out a strategy weeks earlier.
He would attack from the south, the easier approach, while Parker and a reserve force would stay to the city's north. Nelson would use his mobility to take out the Danish guns. He had studied the maps. Sandbars were no threat. As for the wind, aggressive action was more important than fretting over wind. Nelson's speech energized Parker's captains. He was by far their most successful leader, and his confidence was catching. Even Sir Hyde was impressed, and the plan was approved. The next morning, Nelson's line of ships advanced on Copenhagen, and the battle began. The Danish guns firing on the British at close range took a fierce toll. Nelson paced the deck of his flagship HMS Elephant, urging his men on. He was in an excited, almost ecstatic state. A shot through the mainmast nearly hit him. "It is warm work, and this day may be the last to any of us at any moment," he told a colonel, a little shaken up by the blast. "But mark you, I would not be elsewhere for thousands." Parker followed the battle from his position to the north. He now regretted agreeing to Nelson's plan. He was responsible for the campaign, and a defeat here could ruin his career. After 4 hours of back-and-forth bombardment, he had seen enough. The fleet had taken a beating and had gained no advantage. On board the Elephant, a lieutenant told Nelson about the signal. The vice admiral ignored it. Continuing to pound the Danish defenses, he eventually called to an officer, "Is number 16 still hoisted?" Number 16 was his own flag. It meant engage the enemy more closely. The officer confirmed that the flag was still flying. "Mind you keep it so," Nelson told him. A few minutes later, Parker's signal still flapping in the breeze, Nelson turned to his flag captain. "You know, Foley, I have only one eye. I have a right to be blind sometimes." and raising his telescope to his blind eye, he calmly remarked, "I really do not see the signal." Torn between obeying Parker and obeying Nelson, the fleet captains chose Nelson. They would risk their careers along with his, but soon the Danish defenses started to crack. Some of the ships anchored in the harbor surrendered, and the firing of the guns began to slow. Less than an hour after Parker's signal to stop the battle, the Danes surrendered. The next day, Parker perfunctorily congratulated Nelson on the victory. He did not mention his subordinates' disobedience. He was hoping the whole affair, including his own lack of courage, would be quietly forgotten. In the heat of battle, the mind tends to lose its balance. Too many things confront you at the same time. Unexpected setbacks, doubts, and criticisms from your own allies. There's a danger of responding emotionally with fear, depression, or frustration. It is vital to keep your presence of mind, maintaining your mental powers, whatever the circumstances. You must actively resist the emotional pull of the moment, staying decisive, confident, and aggressive no matter what hits you. Make the mind tougher by exposing it to adversity. Learn to detach yourself from the chaos of the battlefield. Let others lose their heads. Your presence of mind will steer you clear of their influence and keep you on course. Must play a great role in war, the domain of the unexpected, since it is nothing but an increased capacity of dealing with the unexpected. We admire presence of mind in an apt repartee as we admire quick thinking in the face of danger. The expression presence of mind precisely conveys the speed and immediacy of the help provided by the intellect.